Hello, my name is Larry Grimm, and I'm a coach, leadership coach, uh, particularly leadership in congregational life. And I'd like to share with you this number one webinar that I've created about family system thinking and leadership. Family system thinking is also called emotional system thinking or natural system thinking. And I'd like to, if you've not already become aware of it, introduce you to it. If you're already aware of it, to remind you of it, and to talk about leadership in the context of that particular way of thinking. I'm going to share my PowerPoint here with you and invite you to participate with me in this webinar. Family system thinking and leadership. System in the Greek is synhistane, and as a verb, which means to place together. In the New Testament, of course, the body of Christ is the acronym or the name for the church. And in such designation, the early church experienced itself as interrelated. We know that from the beginning, it's had a sense that every part has its place in the full body, and each part relates to the other part in an integral way. Well, our bodies, of course, are made up of a variety of systems. We have a muscular system, we have a nervous system, we have an immune system, and we have an endocrine system, just to name a few of the systems that make up one body. And you know that if one of those systems is diseased in some way or having problems, it affects the whole body. And that has been the stress, of course, of Paul in talking about the church as a body. Now, those in the body, there's individualistic ways of leadership, which we usually often are using to think about leadership of teaching elders and ruling elders. An individual leadership approach, one is to involve our thinking about charisma. All of us want to be charismatic leaders, I'm sure. We want to have that attraction to the fold that brings people in because they know that we have something great to offer. Charismatic leadership has some advantages. One is that it can quickly energize a group, can get them fired up. It creates a kind of togetherness that's strong, but it's often stick to an enmeshment togetherness. It revives congregations quickly. You know how small congregations can gather around a particular personality and make it happen. The kind of leadership creates movement towards the goals in a very short time. There's some disadvantages, though, to charismatic leadership, which are worth noting. And one is that the emphasis is on personality. And that may tend to polarize the group of the congregation in terms of, well, I like that pastor or I don't like the pastor. You know, that becomes the issue. It also can be that the group defines itself in opposition to some other group. Often charismatic relationship will take a strong position over and against something, so that when that over and against something disappears, either an entity or a entity or an issue, then the people are left wondering, well, what are we about? The other is that it makes succession difficult. To pass leadership from one person to another is very difficult when it's charismatic oriented, because the charisma of one person is not the charisma of the next leadership. Although there have been some dynasties, family dynasties in church leadership, it's not always the best for the body. It tends to create dependency in the body upon the one leader. And not only is that difficult in the body, but it's also very stressful for the leader, who by his or her own charisma tries to carry the whole load of the congregation. Another way of thinking about individual leadership is consensus building. Now, there's some good advantages to consensus building because, for one thing, everybody feels as though they're valued at the table. Their opinion is important and noted. Usually in consensus building, we're seeking agreement, and there's a shared agreement in the decision, like in a jury. If you have a jury, everybody comes to the final decision in the same place. May have different reasons, but at least they come to the final decision in the same one or up or down. In a consensus building, the leader guides the process, really process oriented. The leader doesn't take a stand necessarily, but enables people to be participating. Although sometimes in consensus building, leaders go around when we're not at the table or not in the meeting, they may try to build some support for a particular direction. In consensus building, there are some disadvantages, of course. It tends to diminish imaginative thinking and creative thinking. People's positions come to the table, but they don't necessarily come to the table to figure things out. They try to change each other's positions. As I said, the leader tends to be process-oriented, so he or she may not take a stand, and not having a leader take a stand can develop anxiety in the group. It tends to give strength to the extremists. One person can say, I'm not going to go in, I'm not going to agree with that, and whatever their reason, they tend to control then the whole decision-making process. It can become a paranoid cultic kind of experience in which over and against one position by a charismatic leader, the consensus building is also driven by worry about the way things are, and let's hang together and stay together. It can provide I don't like this image because of its own racist orientation. We can circle the wagon, so to speak, and expect agreement of everybody in the congregation. In contrast, system thinking, contrast with individualistic thinking, means that the leadership is self-differentiating all the time. It's an organic relationship characterized by the leader functioning as part of rather than apart from the congregation. Now, this is true in our particular Presbyterian orientation of ruling and teaching elders together, functioning as part of the congregation rather than apart from. However, the leadership is based on position rather than personality. Position as within the system. It helps to create togetherness and not stuck togetherness, not being based on personality but on position. It rather enables people to come together in a very meaningful way. The basic concept of leadership through self-differentiation is this. If a leader will take the primary responsibility for his or her own position as head and work to define his or her own goals and self, while staying in touch with the rest of the organism, there's a more than reasonable chance that the body will follow. There may be initial resistance, but if the leaders can stay in touch with the resistors, the body will usually go along. I know that there's an awful lot of conversation about patriarchy and the problems of patriarchy. And patriarchy, when it's separated from the rest of the body or any kind of hierarchy, separated from the rest of the body, it can become pathological. It's the separation that creates the pathology. So staying in touch, taking responsibility for leadership, for defining the direction of the congregation, while staying in touch, especially with those who resist, enables a hierarchy to be a healthy hierarchy. Within that statement by Edwin Friedman in his book, Generation to Generation, there are three elements or components of self-differentiating leadership. How well are you as the head of the body defining yourself without demanding agreement or caving into disagreement? Again, this is true of you as an individual leader, but as teaching elder, but it's also the role of the session as a whole, ruling elder, teaching elder together. How well, as the head of the body, are we defining um, what God is asking us to do? What is the call to which God has uh, issued us? At one point in my life, I realized I didn't have a personal mission statement. And so I developed one. My mission, my sense of mission is to live the love, peace, and justice of God in Jesus Christ, and to teach that to church and society, particularly by coaching leaders in family system thinking. That's my mission, and that's why I'm doing what I do. What's your mission statement? Have you created one for yourself? Do you have that clear identification of who you are, what you've been called to do, and the way by which you are going to do it? So the second thing is, how well are you maintaining a non-anxious presence? Anytime there's change, there's anxiety, and anxiety feeds itself like a circuit, an electronic circuit. So if you get it caught up in the anxiety building process of change, then it will scuttle your work for transformation. Your own maintaining of a non-anxious presence through meditation, through reflection, through a stronger, an increasing awareness of how the anxiety in the body is functioning, that will allow you to stay open to new ideas and creativity that comes along. Thirdly, how are you keeping in touch with the congregation? It's easy to let our leadership fall on new things and creating new programs, and forgetting that we need to be in touch with those who may disagree with where we're going in the congregation, where the congregation is called to go by God. This staying in touchness gives a chance for you to define yourself again and again with clarity and without demanding agreement as to where you think you're going, and without caving into disagreement. Coffee, 20 minutes a year with someone who disagrees with number one may in fact go a long ways to reducing the sabotage that is inevitable. In the body of Christ, we seek healthy congregations. And health is a balance between being apart being apart from, and being together, to standing independently and also having a sense of belonging. And we as leaders have to foster that. We foster interdependence without encouraging polarization. Foster independence without encouraging polarization, and allowing interdependence without promoting cults. That balance. It seeks to promote togetherness. As you define yourself clearly, you'll find others are able to define themselves more clearly as well. And it enables people to decide how they're going to be together and how they're going to stand apart. It seeks to promote that togetherness, but not at the cost of progress. It normalizes transition, and it's less susceptible to cutoffs. People are less likely to take their marbles and go home. And most of all, it reverses the pull and drain of dependents who normally gain power from the expectation that their demand to be included at their price and pace will always be satisfied. In other words, we're gathering people around the mission, not around the ministry. It makes the task of leadership more enriched and gives more leverage, actually, because the focus is on the development of the leader's own being. You can develop techniques, and techniques are important, and methods are helpful, but it's the being that we focus on in developing in family system leadership. It requires less knowledge overload about other methods. It reduces innovating conflicts of wills and triangles. Have you ever been invited into a triangle? It does not go into the direction of increasing interdependency. It fosters less guilt among followers. And because its primary focus is the leader's own position, it automatically answers questions about the distance a leadership should try to maintain. The focus on mission far outweighs the importance of bonding together in order to have a loving relationship with members in the congregation. Finally, because the approach is less load-bearing and more self-expressive, constantly saying, here's where we are, here's where I am, here's where God is leading us. It minimizes the influence of factors that contribute to burnout. If you're not sleeping well at night, it's perhaps is because you're not clearly defining yourself to your own satisfaction to the members of the congregation. Those are all great comments from Edwin Friedman in his book, Generation to Generation. And so part of our role as leadership is to take the pulse of the body. Of course, we're not taking the pulse, really. We're looking at the whole body and all the systems that are involved. We have rational systems that we create that are important, our constitution, our manual of operations in the session, and the designation of roles and responsibilities. All those are important. But what are the marks of a healthy congregation that we have to listen to as well? First of all, accepting differences and not denying them. Now, there's all kinds of differences. There's differences in background, heritage, differences in sexual orientation, differences in social status, but there are also differences in faith development and where we are and how we express our experience of God. How can we include those in the life of the congregation rather than deny them? That's part of coaching. Healthy congregations focus on their strengths rather than their weaknesses. Remember when you were in high school and when you got a test back, it was marked with red ink all over it, or a composition that was focused on, the teacher's evaluation was focused on the weaknesses of the project. We tend to condition ourselves in our society to look at our weaknesses and try to cover our weaknesses or try to strengthen our weaknesses. But a healthy congregation looks at its strengths and focuses on its strengths, celebrates its strengths, and works in mission for its strengths, and therefore focus on mission rather than on past or the pastor or survival. One of the strongest tendencies in our society now, and church society, is to try and talk about how we're going to survive. But the more we talk about how we survive, the less focus we get on mission, which is what really energizes us for a future role in society. So what are your reflections on this presentation? I invite you to do some, to think about them, think about these what's been presented here, go back over it, and find how enriching it can be for you. You may want to identify the emotional systems of which you're a part right now. What are you participating in? How are they relating to one another? You can draw circles of your systems of which you're a part. How do they overlap? How do they touch each other? What marks of health do you see in these systems? I've given you a few marks of health in the congregational life. How are they showing up in other systems of which you're a part? And how well are you differentiating yourself within each emotional system? Where do you need to apply your efforts at self-differentiation? That's what I do in my coaching. I enable my folks that I work with as a coach in leadership to do those things, to look at those systems and identify how they're doing and improve how they're doing and differentiating themselves. If you'd like to become a part of that, I'll send you a covenant if you send me an email requesting it. I provide monthly didactic teachings like this online. I also do monthly peer coaching group online and individual meeting face-to-face somewhere, or having online conversations. The didactics are free and welcome anybody, to any session member. Everybody can participate in those. But I do the coaching in groups and individually at a fee rate. So let me know what your interest is, and let me be a part of your success in giving leadership to the body of Christ. Thank you very much.